is that the reason is the fact that all of our experiences are impermanent. Nothing lasts forever. And so we go back and forth between relative happiness and relative sadness. This occurs because of the law of karma. What the Buddha teaches is that with our three doors, body, speech, and mind, we, with every activity of our three doors, body, speech, and mind, we create a cause. And that cause eventually ripens at some point in our experience. And so, because of the primary types of activity of our minds, which is, whether we want to believe it or not, is hatred, greed, and ignorance, we accumulate these negative habitual tendencies within our mind streams. And these negative habitual tendencies eventually ripen as our experiences. And so each experience has its own duration of karmic energy. So therefore, nothing can last. Once that energy is exhausted, the experience is also exhausted. And so, as a result, everything is constantly changing. And so that is the reason for the suffering of change. All our experiences are constantly changing. There's nothing that's constant except change. And so the other type of suffering is the suffering of suffering. Sometimes, this brings to mind, when I was a kid, I grew up in the Virgin Islands. And when I was a kid, we didn't wear shoes when we went out to play. The only time we wore shoes was to go to school and to church. And so a common experience was to bump especially your big toe against rocks or something like that. And actually, we used to call it a bust toe, because you actually used to burst your toe. And before that is completely cured, you go back out, barefooted again, and you bump the same toe.
Right.
That's suffering upon suffering. We have seen where sometimes so many different negative things occur, one after the other. It's like the phrase, when it rains, when it pours. Thank you. So basically, it is when we have one type of negative experience occurring one after the other, that is like suffering upon suffering. And then we have suffering in the making. And that basically, again, goes back to the law of karma. With every activity, as I mentioned before, it creates a cause, which ripens at some time in the future. It could be immediate also. Seldom it is immediate though. And so, as a result, these karmic ripenings ripen sometimes down the road. The Buddha teaches that we have taken birth, rebirth on many times, since beginningless time. And so the ripenings actually can occur not only in this life, but we can have ripenings from previous lives. This is why sometimes we have experiences we can't explain. Why is this happening to me? I have been such a good person. I am compassionate. I am loving. I care for everyone, including the little chihuahua. And yet I'm experiencing all of this stuff. And the reason for that is because normally what we experience in this life are ripenings or causes from previous lifetimes. The Buddha teaches that if you want to know what our lives were like before, look at this life. He also teaches that if you want to know what your life is going to be like, look at what you're doing now. Because that will ripen at some point in the future. So those are the basic foundational types of sufferings that we experience. This is what I would say diagnosed as our illness when the Buddha looked from his awakened mind. There are some all-pervasive suffering that occurs to all of us. It's birth, old age, sickness, and death. As a matter of fact, when the Buddha, what really motivated the Buddha to give up all of his princely activities and to go and practice in the forest was when he saw for the first time old age, sickness, and death. And he couldn't believe that this occurs to everyone. So he set out to find an antidote to old age, sickness, and death. When I first heard that teaching, I said to myself, I would never have thought of that. I mean, that is so extraordinary in his thinking that there could be possible an antidote to old age, sickness, and death. And yet that's what he set out to do. So that's our condition. That's our present condition. The other truth is the truth of the origin of our suffering. What causes our suffering, according to the Buddha? And the Buddha teaches that what causes our suffering is desire. When I first heard that too, that teaching, I says, what? Are you serious? That it is desire. See, what the Buddha teaches is that our belief in self-nature being inherently real, this self that we think, is absolutely true, and that's the end of the question. He says that that belief that we are solid and real is false. And so, however, as a result of the belief in self-nature being inherently real, and of course we know we believe that, then we go about wanting to protect and to take care of this self. And this is where desire comes into play. The desire to have a happier life. The desire to have a comfortable life. The desire to accumulate things. Thinking that these are the reasons why we will actually be happy. Because we all want to be happy. There is no question about that. So, however, if you look at the nature of desire, you will see how that could be, keeps you in a completely distracted state. Because there is no end to desire. I remember years ago asking myself, when I was a school teacher, when is enough enough? There is no such thing, when we believe that self-nature is inherently real, there is no such thing as enough being enough. We always want to move on to something bigger and better. And so, the continuation of this grasping and wanting to hold on to our experiences and things is continuous. And as a result, it keeps our mind streams in a completely and absolutely distracted state. We are always moving towards something, because that is the nature of desire. And so, as a result, our minds remain completely and absolutely distracted. Now, that's the bad news. There is some good news here. That's the bad news. That is the first part of the diagnosis. That the essence of our illness is suffering. That the cause of that illness is desire, because in the belief that self-nature is inherently real. And there, as a result, is always this grasping, wanting, thinking that we can improve this self. So the third truth is, the cessation of suffering. The truth of the cessation of suffering. There is an antidote, according to the Buddha, that there is an antidote to suffering.